Nārāyaṇa Gosvāmī Mahārāja Śrīla Gurudev ki jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupāda Rashatarashatashmar Śrīla Bhaktivedānta Vāman Gosvāmī Mahārāja ki jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupāda Rashatarashatashmar Śrīla Bhaktivedānta Swāmī Mahārāja Śrīla Prabhupāda ki jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupāda Rashatarashatashmar Śrīla Bhaktivedānta Keśava Gosvāmī Mahārāja ki jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupāda Rashatarashatashmad Śrīla Bhaktivedānta Saraswati Gosvāmī Prabhupāda ki jai. Nitila Pravishta Mahābhagavat Śrīla Gopāla Babaji Mahārāja ki jai. Nitila Pravishta Śrīla Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Nitila Pravishta Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Śrīla Jagannath Das Babaji Mahārāja ki jai. Śrī Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai. Śrīla Baldev Vijibhushan Prabhu ki jai. Śrīla Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur ki jai. Śrī Nartam Srinivas Shamananda Prabhu Trai ki jai. Śrīla Kṛṣṇa Das Kaviraj Gosvāmī Prabhu ki jai. Śrī Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Śrī Jīva Gopāla-campūḥ Raghunath Śrāda Gosvāmī Prabhu ki jai. Śrī Swarup Dāmodarāṣṭakam Ramanandari Śrī Gopāla Vrinda ki jai. Namachay Śrīla Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Śrī Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Śrī Advaita Gadadhar Śrī Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Śrī Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Vraja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Sarva Abhishta Bharata Giriraj Maharaj ki jai. Śrī Radha Kund Shama Kund ki jai. Śrī Yamuna Devi Ganga Devi ki jai. Śrī Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Śrī Bhakti Devi ki jai. Śrī Purnamasi Yogamaya ki jai. Śrī Gopeshwar Mahadev ki jai. Śrī Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Oh, Śrī Dīpavali ki jai. Dīpavali Mahamahotsav ki jai. Śrī Radha Dāmodarāṣṭakam ki jai. Śrī Yashoda Dāmodarāṣṭakam ki jai. Śrī Dāmodarāṣṭakam ki jai. Satyavrata Muni ki jai. Śrī Kṛṣṇa Dvaipayan Veda Vyasdev ki jai. Śrī Sanatana Gosvāmīpāda ki jai. Śrīla Gurudev ki jai. Śrīla Jīva Gosvāmīpāda ki jai. Śrī Gopāla-campūḥ ki jai. Śrī Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Śrī Nitāya Gaura Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Dandavat Pranams to... That's strange. Usually there'd be more people watching by now. I wonder if it actually worked. If it actually went live everywhere. Anyways, there's a couple devotees watching. So, yeah, now we're going to read the last part of this beautiful... Haribol, Raseshwari Mataji, Radhe Radhe. So now we're going to read the last part of this book, Dāma-bandhana-nibandhanam. And this is super juicy, to say the least. So let's jump into it. The following account is an excerpt from Śrīla Bhakti Prajñāna Keśava Gosvāmī Mahārāja, his life and teachings, by Śrīmad Bhaktivedānta Nārāyaṇa Gosvāmī Mahārāja. Once, during the month of Kartik, Śrīla Gurupāda Padma had brought his noble presents to Śrī Keśava Gaudiya Math. One day, he was sitting in his bhajan kutir, chanting Harinam, absorbed in transcendental emotions. I had sat down nearby and was silently reading the chapter on Śrī Dāma-bandhana-nibandhanam from Śrī Gopāla-campūḥ. As I read, I became completely fascinated with Śrīla Jīva Gosvāmi's beautiful description of this pastime. Finally, unable to restrain myself, I ran over to Śrīla Gurudev and said, Śrīla Jīva Gosvāmi was a Mahapurush, a most exalted personality, and an unrivaled philosopher. At the same time, he was a transcendental Rasik poet whose work is eloquent, touching, and descriptive. Although such a combination of vast erudition and poetic artistry is rarely found in this world, when we read his narration of Śrī Dāma-bandhana-nibandhanam, we see the two unified in an astonishing manner. I began to read that description aloud. As I neared the end of the story, my Śrīla Gurudev suddenly began weeping. An incessant flow of tears cascaded down his cheeks, and other symptoms of spiritual ecstasy were clearly visible in his form. I have only seen such an expression of extraordinary spiritual emotions once or twice in my life. Wow. So now we'll read that chapter that my Gurudev read to my Param Gurudev. Dāma-bandhana-nibandhanam. The determination to bind Śrī Kṛṣṇa with rope. And Yamala-arjuna-mocanam. The deliverance of the twin Arjuna trees. From chapter 8 of Śrī Gopāla-campūḥ, pūrva, by Śrīla Jīva Gosvāmīpāda. One second, just checking everything's all right here. Oh wow, a bunch more people showed up. Great. Dandavat pranams, Madhavi Didi. And I just want to make sure the settings are okay. I think it's okay. Audio or not? I'll take it off. Okay. Editor's note. Oh, and just Madhavi Didi, before I forget, I just wanted to let you know that I checked with some senior devotees at Rup Sanatan Gaudiya Math, and it is okay to do what you wanted with the Tulsi sticks. You can let Nandan Prabhu know. Okay. Every morning before Śrī Kṛṣṇa takes the cows out to graze, an assembly of Rajavasis gather together at Śrī Nanda Baba's palace. For the pleasure of Śrī Nanda Baba and his 4 brothers, as well as for Śrī Kṛṣṇa, Śrī Balaram, and the other Rajavasis, Snigdhakanta and Madhukanta narrate Krishna's pastimes. What these twin brothers narrated one day is about to be described. Okay, so this is just before Krishna is going to take the cows out to graze, and he's with the assembly of Rajavasis in Nanda Baba's palace. They're all listening to Madhukanta and Snigdhakanta right now, telling this story. The next morning, in that assembly, when all the Gopas who were part of the Vaishya community had gracefully taken their seats, Śrī Snigdhakanta began. The month of Kartik was nearing conclusion. Early one morning, Śrī Yashoda gladly beheld her sleeping little Gopal, whose eyes, now closed, resembled 2 blue lotus flowers. Mother Yashoda contentedly gazed upon her child and began to gently and lovingly stroke him with her hands, which are as soft as fresh budding leaves. When she noted with relief that he was again in deep sleep, she slowly and silently left his bedside. She entered the courtyard on her own. She entered the courtyard on her own, tied her cloth tightly around her, and started churning some yogurt to use in her home. Today, on the affectionate and insistent invitation of Śrī Nanda Mahāraja's elder brother Śrī Upananda, Śrī Rohini Devi, accompanied by her son Baladev, mounted a magnificent chariot and went to his home. The maidservants were also coming and going while performing their different services. There was quite a lot to do because the month of Margashirsha, the topmost month of the year, was approaching, and the annual festival of Indra Puja, which is observed by the people in general, and which has long been celebrated in traditional culture, was at hand. Which, Indra Puja, which is tomorrow. When all the maidservants were thus engaged in their respective tasks, the Queen of Vraj, Śrī Yashoda, personally sent to churning the yogurt with great care. To encourage her son's pleasant slumber, she sang sweetly as she churned. Absorbed in thoughts of Śrī Kṛṣṇa, with her mind and her soul fully offered to him, she sang detailed descriptions of his childhood pastimes as her eyes admired his lovely face. Srila Shukadeva Goswami has mentioned this in Śrīmad Bhagavatam 10.9.2. One day, when all the maidservants were engaged in various tasks, Śrī Yashoda, the wife of Śrī Nanda, personally began to churn yogurt. At that time, songs about Śrī Kṛṣṇa's childhood pastimes came to her mind, and she began to sing them. As dark-complexioned Vrajeshwari Shri Yashoda churned, her arms repeatedly moved back and forth. A series of girdles embedded with jewels encircled her waistcloth, and beautiful bangles adorned her arms. Her ornaments sounded in time with the vigorous movement of her waist and arms. Meanwhile, her son drowsily opened his eyes a little. As Rajeshwari beheld the charm of his lotus face, she turned with greater intensity and sang, how do I sing this? Oh my God, let me figure this out. I'm just going to make something up. Gokulapati kula tilakam saasiha krita sukrita vraja rachita sukha vraja nayananandi samiha. I'll play Mardana. Oh, my darling son, you are the crest ornament of the dynasty of Gokulpati Sri Nanda Maharaj. The Brajavasis must have performed greatly pious acts to witness you bringing joy to their hearts. Your activities delight the eyes of all. Anandur Bhava Jan Anandur Bhava Janma Mahotsava Nandita Gopa Samaja Bhutanika Mriti Navamangala Kriti Balayita Gokula Raja. You rouse the joy of the cowherd community by the blissful festival of your birth, and by the recent and auspicious act of killing Putana, you have spread the glory of your father, the king of Gokul, far and wide. Dāya-nivartana Shakata-vivartana Anubhavena parita Satrina vartaka Vayuni vartaka Parameshe nanita Parameshe nanita. After eliminating Shakatasura, who made everyone lose all composure, you are blessed by the auspicious rituals of the Brahmins. Later, Sri Nanda's worshipful deity, Parameshwar, returned you to us after destroying Trinavarta, along with his storm. Madhura prangana virachita ringana Jala janayana supunya Nana kelishu nrita kalalishu Adashita varanapa anaipunya. Oh, lotus-eyed boy of incomparable piety, you used to crawl about on your tiny hands and knees on our charming courtyard. You have shown great expertise in playing various games and demonstrating many varieties of dance. Tarnakabala disha balita tanbadi Valaita manjula shobha Jaratini vahe Kautuka kala he Prabalita meta loba. When you used to grab the tails of the calves, they would run away, dragging you along. At those times, your gorgeous form was pulled through the dust and cow dung, which gave you an even more enchanting splendor. While playfully quarreling with the elderly gopis, you would frivolously increase everyone's confusion through your antics. Mamataramano Sukamudvitano Pratatam Satatam Krishna Dhrutamurari Kurutanu Vedhim Guru Kelavali Krita Krishna Puru Kelavali Krita Krishna. O Krishna, since I am your mother, forever continue to expand my already boundless joy. Quickly grow healthy and strong, and fulfill our desire by delighting our eyes with your many lively pastimes. Tribhuvana Darshana Vismaya Marshana Nishchita Vaishnava Maya Nishchita Vaishnava Maya Hari Vari Vasa Sukada Tamahasya Vigata Jara Marakaya. At first, you caused bewilderment by displaying the three worlds within your mouth. Later, however, it was understood that by doing so, you confirmed the existence of Lord Vishnu's spiritual illusory potency, Vaishnavi Maya. O Krishna, may your body be freed from aging and death, and may you become the bestower of bliss by serving Śrī Hari. Gokulapati Kula Tilakam Stamaseha Gokulapati Kula Tilakam Tamaseha. It's hard to read while playing Mridanga, but it'd be kind of fun to do. Okay, one second. Let's see what the footnote said here. Editor's footnote. Even when Sri Yashoda saw the universe within Krishna's mouth, she did not regard him with awe and respect. Instead, as is shown here, she simply attributed everything to the Lord's spiritual potency, which she considered had been invoked by her and Nanda Mahāraja's sincere worship. And that's why she said, may you become the bestower of bliss by serving Śrī Hari. She's telling her son to serve Śrī Hari. So then, Śrī Kṛṣṇa, the ocean of eternal charm, woke up and climbed down from the bed, crying. As he stretched his body, he took long breaths and rubbed his sleepy eyes. Now fully awake, he cried, Ma, Ma. Hearing the sound of the churning rod, Sri Gopal tottered over to his mother. Śrī Kṛṣṇa, the best of the blessed and the king of beauty, stopped the rod from churning. Sri Yashoda's motherly affection for Śrī Kṛṣṇa expanded within her heart, completely filling it with the desire to cradle him, and in her mood there was a trace of fear and grief. As her motherly affection surged, she fed her young child the milk that had spontaneously poured from her breasts in a stream. Didn't Gurudev explain in, I think it was the first chapter, or was it the second chapter, that one of the unique sattvic bhavs of Vatsalya Ras is automatic milk flowing from the breasts. Mother Yashoda is gracious and splendorous like the rainy season. Her breasts began to shower streams of milk that resembled a continuous downpour, and Śrī Kṛṣṇa, like a chatak bird, fittingly and gleefully began to drink that downpour. With great eagerness, Śrī Kṛṣṇa drank the milk of that blessed breasts. He had only half satisfied his hunger when Mother Yashoda noticed that the milk in the next room was boiling over. Although her child was eager for her breast milk, she immediately put him down, although it was apparently unwise of her to do so, and hastened inside to save the milk. She did not carry him as she ran, fearing that he might fall. Madhukanta interrupted. Snigdhakanta, "What are you saying, my brother? That is illogical. How could it be that Śrī Yashoda left her starving baby to go elsewhere? She is the faultless ideal among all loving mothers within this universe." Snigdhakanta laughed and said, "My dear elder brother, just wait and listen to me attentively. In reality, her leaving her child to save the milk is also a lovely pastime of motherly affection." Madhukanta was skeptical. "How?" he asked. Snigdhakanta replied, "In the absence of Śrī Kṛṣṇa, the residents of Braj see that their bodies, homes, and other possessions are more or less waning. From the day he was born, his parents, Śrī Nanda and Śrī Yashoda, considered that all those residents of Braj, as well as all the items used to serve Śrī Kṛṣṇa, have abundant mamata for him." Mamata means minus, possessiveness. Even Sri Brahma confirms this in his prayers in Śrīmad Bhagavatam 10.14.35. "O Śrī Kṛṣṇa, the residents of Braj have completely offered their homes, their wealth, their relatives, their beloveds, their soul, their bodies, their children, their lives, and their minds, everything at your lotus feet. How, in all fairness, could you not award them a result superior to what you awarded Putana and other demons? What can be said of the love that Śrī Kṛṣṇa's own mother and father have for him, when Sri Brahma himself has glorified the love of the other Vrajvasis? All of the Vrajvasis' rich milk and yogurt, as well as their bodies, homes, and other possessions, are exclusively meant for the service of Śrī Kṛṣṇa. Thus, while serving Śrī Kṛṣṇa, it is befitting to have more mamata or attachment for the objects used to serve Śrī Kṛṣṇa than for Śrī Kṛṣṇa himself." That's an important point. I'll reread that. While serving Śrī Kṛṣṇa, it is befitting to have more mamata or attachment for the objects used to serve Śrī Kṛṣṇa than for Śrī Kṛṣṇa himself. We want to serve Krishna. We don't just want Krishna, we want to serve him. Thus, it is specifically understood that Mother Yashoda's intention in leaving Krishna to save the milk was most exalted. This has been sanctioned in the scriptures that advocate bhakti. The import is that it is appropriate for Mother Yashoda to have more attachment for the objects that are dear to Śrī Kṛṣṇa than for Krishna himself. Indeed, this is the eternal nature of an affectionate mother. Having concluded this, it is only fitting that Śrī Yashoda first attended to those objects used in the service of Śrī Kṛṣṇa. At such times, she tolerates many personal inconveniences and remains unaware of her various household duties. With the loving mood born of her permanent emotion, her sthāyi bhav, that "this is my son," she is always aware of Śrī Kṛṣṇa's needs more than her own bodily need, or her own bodily or household needs. She is always conscious of his complete dependence on her. Her perpetual attitude is, "Śrī Kṛṣṇa's necessities are my necessities, and fulfilling them is my sole obligation." Only the residents of Braj know what is involved in expressing this type of affection. Even when they chastise Śrī Kṛṣṇa and punish him, he knows that they are just taking care of him. This is because a parent's chastisement is considered part of loving and raising their children. There is no limit to what I can say about the boundless expression of their parental affection. And if the residents of Braj feel angry with Krishna out of their affection for him, being the object of their extreme mamata, he is even prepared to undergo bondage. Just see, even fire in the form of lightning sometimes appears in dense rain clouds. There's a footnote here. Affection is part of the permanent emotion, sthāyi bhav, of Vatsalya ras, and anger is a transitory emotion, a sanchari bhav, of that ras. The superior's mood of Vatsalya ras is nourished by the transitory emotion of anger, and it is part of their affection. Just as rain clouds become charming when lightning appears in them, sometimes anger appears in those with Vatsalya ras, making their mood more charming. Actually, without anger, the mood of parenthood would not be complete. Okay. The evidence for the above statement is that both Mother Yashoda and her son benefit each other by their mutual love. Listen as I describe their affectionate dealings. When Mother Yashoda went to take the milk off the stove for the pleasure of her son, she first comforted him, saying, "My darling son, may all your problems and difficulties come to me. Watch this pot of yogurt for just a minute while I check on the boiling milk. I will return quickly." Just as swiftly as she put her son aside and left that churning place, she returned. But even in that time, milk poured from her breast out of deep motherly affection, wetting her blouse. It poured so much that it made the floor slippery. Still, Śrī Kṛṣṇa's wishes had been checked, and he was most perturbed. In anger, he bit his trembling reddish lips and burst into tears. Then, picking up a small grinding stone which was lying nearby, he broke the pot of half-churned yogurt. However, he did not even get the slightest bit of butter from it. Poets have described his beauty at that time. Little Krishna's white teeth, a series of moons, were enveloped by the reddish hue reflecting from his lips. His two eyes, resembling restless partridges, were full of tears, and his lotus hands shone as they vigorously sloshed yogurt here and there. In this way, when the half-churned yogurt from the pot covered the entire floor, another type of festival manifested. Just then, his eyes caught sight of a pot of fresh butter hanging from the ceiling in the adjoining room. He ran to the door, slid the latch aside, and pushed it open. Then, moving the door stopper back into place, he slipped into the room and closed the door behind him. He used a nearby cot as a step, lowered the pot of butter, and started to eat it. Thereafter, he took the remaining butter and secretly sneaked out through the window of that room. Meanwhile, Mother Yashoda had stopped the milk from boiling over into the fire. The milk cooled down to a simmer within seconds, and she took it off the stove. She dashed back to where she had left her son, only to find that he was gone. However, seeing evidence of her son's activities, she laughed in mixed anger and amusement. At first, out of suspicion, she became perturbed. But then Yogamaya manifested an aerial voice, which gave her knowledge and made her laugh. The aerial voice said, "Feeling hungry and thirsty, your little bumblebee has made a hole in the bud of a lotus flower that had no pollen." When he saw that it was merely water that began dripping from that flower, he became disappointed and went to another lotus flower, where he found a big supply of honey. The import is that in order to get fresh butter, your son performed all these deeds. He first broke the churning pot, but did not find butter there. He then found it hanging in the next room. You have displayed your intelligence by deciding to leave your baby and go to cool down the milk. But if you can calm the anger of your child, you will receive even more praise. I love how the aerial voice just talks to her. Upon hearing the aerial voice, Mother Yashoda laughed and followed the thief's conspicuous yogurt footprints into the next room. She managed to force the doors open. Then she stepped inside, only to behold her son's other matchless mischief. Tracing his path of escape, she finally spotted him, his eyes restless with fear. He was thinking, "I have stolen fresh butter. If my mother sees me here, how will I face her?" His eyes moved about so frantically that they seemed to be on the verge of leaping into his ears. In other words, his eyes and his ears were watching out for his mother. Mother Yashoda saw him sitting restless-eyed atop a grinding mortar that he had overturned with all of his strength, feeding butter to the monkeys. Astonished by this, she smiled softly. She quietly crept up from behind her guilty son. It is said that a wealthy person has 2 eyes, but a thief has 100. That is to say, a wealthy person has only 2 eyes to look after his treasures, but a thief has 100 to spot that person's wealth and to steal it. Although a person may be extremely careful to protect his wealth, it is not inaccessible to a thief. By nature, monkeys are proud of exhibiting their strength, but today their bellies were fully satisfied, so when they saw Mother Yashoda advancing, holding a stick covered with cloth, they immediately scampered up the nearby trees. This alerted Krishna to what was happening, and he also fled. Seeing her son fleeing, Mother Yashoda broke into a run and began to chase him. A shower of flowers fell from her braid. "Oh, king of thieves," she loudly called, "where are you going? Stop, stop!" Hearing this, Śrī Kṛṣṇa uttered a faint cry, and a smile appeared on his face, enhancing his beauty. Mother Yashoda ran quickly after him. Although she came close, she could not catch him. It was as if two clouds, one big and one small, were being chased by the wind from the west to east. Across the sky, the larger cloud unable to catch up with the smaller one. Similarly, this mother could not catch her son. There's a footnote here. Here, Śrī Yashoda and Śrī Kṛṣṇa are appropriately compared to the clouds because both of their complexions are dark like rain clouds. Little Krishna was confident that his mother would never pursue him. Little Krishna was confident that his mother would never pursue him beyond the main gate, for she would then be seen running. She'd be seen running in public. Therefore, he intentionally ran in that direction. Mother Yashoda knew that at that time of day, no one would be outside the gate, so she kept chasing him. As long as Krishna ran without looking back, his mother was unable to catch him. But as soon as he turned his head back in fear, she caught him by his hand. He frantically moved his eyes about, as if trying to continue running away. He began crying in an attempt to reduce Mother Yashoda's anger, and out of impudence, he started trembling artificially. But he did not give up his childish pranks. Whenever she forcefully held his face so that she could look at him in the eye, Śrī Kṛṣṇa turned his face in such a way as to wipe the oily gloss of butter from his mouth and make it look dry. Threatening him, Mother Yashoda said, "Oh, Krishna, you have given me so much trouble. Before you steal from your home, first look at this stick in my hand." When she saw her lotus-eyed son's terror upon hearing these words, Shri Rajeshwari tossed that stick aside. "Don't beat me, mother," Krishna beseeched her. The queen of Raj scorned him. "But you are a thief, a thief!" Laughing to herself, she suddenly and forcefully instigated a quarrel with him. You are the king of thieves, Chor!" Krishna protested. "No, mother, Chor took birth in your dynasty, not mine." And there's a footnote here. Editor's footnote. In the dynasty of Śrī Yashoda's father, there was a Gopa named Chor Ghosh. The literal meaning of Chor is thief. Thus, Śrī Kṛṣṇa denounced Śrī Yashoda's dynasty, considering himself to belong exclusively to his father's dynasty. So, no, mother, Chor took birth in your dynasty, not mine. Why would we have a Chor, a thief, in our home? In this way, Mother Yashoda and her butter-stealing son argued with each other. "Oh, really? Well, who broke the pot of yogurt?" she again inquired. Krishna replied, "The Supreme Lord. He was punishing you." "But," she continued, "who fed butter to the monkeys? He who created them?" "No," she exclaimed, "I suspect that you always feast with great relish on the fresh butter we prepare for the use in our religious sacrifices." Mother Yashoda scolded her son as she would a thief, but finally her heart softened. She laughed with anger and said, just admit you're a thief. Give up your arrogance. Just admit your theft. Give up your arrogance." Thus pressed by his mother, Śrī Kṛṣṇa burst into tears. "Look, Ma," he sobbed, "when you anxiously rushed to save the milk, your ankle bells struck the pot of yogurt and it broke. How is this my fault?" "And the monkeys," he continued, "were inspired by the Supreme Lord to sneak into the house to steal. When they began taking the butter, I caught them. What did I do wrong?" And then, he retorted, "the stick in your hand frightened me, so even though I am completely innocent, I fled like a thief.
You saw I was so afraid, but still you mercilessly chased me all for no reason." Mother Yashoda spoke as if lamenting. "Oh, you are the king of those skilled in argument," she said. "You are the best of thieves. Although you are the son of Śrī Rajaraj, the most noble of men, your nature has become like a monkey's because you are fond of them." When fearful Śrī Kṛṣṇa heard this, he pointed to the forest and said, "If I'm a monkey, then I will live in the forest," which slightly frightened his mother. Who knows, she thought, this arrogant boy could easily put his threat into action. To keep him from running into the forest, I must tie him up. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for me to single-handedly manage my household duties and this child. Turning to Krishna, she openly said, "You thief, you restless boy! You who bewilder one and all by the charm of your flickering eyes, why don't you simply accept my prohibitions? Look, I will tie you up and then quickly return to the house. If you have any strength left, you can show it to me by trying to steal something else." As she started to bind him, his eyes became moist, and in fury, he began to loudly cry out, "Oh, Mother Rohini!" he shrieked. "Where have you gone with my big brother? Because you are not here today, this mother is trying to tie me up. This mother is tying me up. Come quickly!" Since Śrī Rohini was far away, she could not hear his cries. But the ladies from neighboring homes who had previously complained about Krishna and who had chastised him did hear his cries. They informed each other of the fun and assembled there. As if taunting her, they reminded Śrī Yashoda of their complaints. "Has this thief done something mischievous in your home also?" they laughed. Mother Yashoda, however, was bent on teaching her son a lesson, so she paid no heed to their remarks. Snatching up a silk ribbon that had fallen from her braid, she immediately began binding her son's waist to the grinding mortar lying in the courtyard, with the same persistence it takes to bind the neck of a calf. But that silk ribbon was 2 fingers too short. She took another ribbon from her hair and joined it to the first one, but still the same problem confronted her. Amazed, she then tried to bind Krishna's waist with several churning ropes that the gopis handed her, but still Rajeshwari could not make up that gap of 2 fingers. From a distance, a cloud that is actually touching the peak of a mountain may be mistakenly perceived as being quite far beyond it. In a similar sense, although the full length of rope was actually touching Śrī Kṛṣṇa, it could not bind his apparently tiny waist. The rope was always 2 fingers too short. There's a footnote here. Editor's footnote. Just as the cloud may appear to be far beyond the mountain's peak when seen from a distance, it appeared to everyone present that there was so much rope being used to bind Śrī Kṛṣṇa that it could not possibly have all been touching his waist. However, just as the cloud is actually touching the mountain, the full length of the rope was actually touching Śrī Kṛṣṇa's waist. But no length of rope could equal the actual circumference of his waist, because in truth, it is unlimited. Observing this, the ladies of Vraj laughed and remarked, "Oh, Vrajeshwari, we already told you that this boy surely has some extraordinary illusory potency. On account of it, he even surpasses Gopāla, the foremost among thieves. He seems to be satisfied simply by eating stolen goods, or, by such acts, he delights both the donors of those goods and the enjoyers of them. He is gradually gaining quite a reputation as one who steals others' possessions." Mother Yashoda responded, "What does this recently born child know about being a thief? He does not know good from bad, but it seems that you are the ones who know some evil trickery. Although you actually favor him, externally you behave in a contrary way." At this, the ladies laughed. "Oh, respected Śrī Yashoda," they said, "we take an oath at your feet that we have nothing to do with these astonishing powers." Finally, Śrī Yashoda reasoned. As Śrī Gargacharya said, "Surely some potency of Śrī Bhagavan surrounds my son. This infant boy cannot know what he is doing. Just to put an end to this bewilderment, Śrī Yashoda repeatedly called for more and more turning ropes from the homes of those gopis. Despite her persistence in her endeavor to bind her son, she could not find any way to accomplish the seemingly impossible task. Instead, Śrī Yashoda, the queen of Vraj, dripped with perspiration, and curls of her hair fell over her face again and again. Finally, she became completely exhausted. As long as Śrī Kṛṣṇa, who was born in the Yadu dynasty, stubbornly refused to be bound, Mother Yashoda's persistent endeavors were fruitless, just as one whose fate is grasped by an unfavorable star is always unsuccessful in his endeavors. And let's just see the footnote here for Yadu dynasty. Srila Jīva Gosvāmī has employed a simile by stating that Śrī Kṛṣṇa was born in the Yadu dynasty. Just as Yadu Maharaj stubbornly refused to accept the order of his father, Yayati Maharaj, similarly, Śrī Kṛṣṇa, who was born in that same Yadu dynasty, stubbornly refused to be bound by his mother. Okay. So as long as Śrī Kṛṣṇa was born in the Yadu dynasty, stubbornly refused to be bound, Mother Yashoda's persistent endeavors were fruitless, just as one whose fate is grasped by an unfavorable star is always unsuccessful in his endeavors. Finally, Śrī Kṛṣṇa's heart was touched by the sight of his mother being so overwhelmed, and almost immediately she successfully bound him with 2 ribbons she had initially used from her hair. It was clear to all present that it is only these 2 ribbons that bound Śrī Kṛṣṇa. The other ropes she had used to tie him were simply lay there. Sorry, guys. It was actually Śrī Kṛṣṇa's maidservant, his Yogamaya potency, who had understood his mind and accomplished the task of binding him. This made Mother Yashoda feel that all those astonishing activities of Śrī Kṛṣṇa were an illusion. When that rope was finally tied tightly around Śrī Kṛṣṇa's waist, Mother Yashoda knotted it to another long rope, which she then tied around the middle of the grinding mortar. She had taught her son Krishna a lesson by tying him up, and thus showed him how unmoved she could be by his stubbornness. His stubbornness isn't gonna change her determination. To protect him, she seated the other little boys around him, and she happily went inside with the giggling gopis to complete her household chores. Within a moment, sorry guys, Within a moment of the Vraj gopis' departure, Śrī Kṛṣṇa manifested his pastime of crying, but he soon cheered up at the thought of pulling the grinding mortar around. He was tied up, but because he was surrounded by other little boys, he stimulated their desire for adventure. As he laughed and played with them, he slowly began to tug at the grinding mortar. The gopis who had gleefully brought ropes from their homes to bind Śrī Kṛṣṇa were now in Śrī Nanda Bhavan with Śrī Yashoda. This meant that their homes were empty. Seizing that excellent opportunity, Śrī Kṛṣṇa directed his friends to steal the fresh butter hanging from the ceilings of their deserted homes and then eat it. Because Śrī Kṛṣṇa found pulling the grinding mortar so entertaining, he never even wanted to free himself by his own hands, nor by the hands of his friends. Just then, his eyes fell on the twin Arjuna trees which stood facing the main gate and which swayed as if dancing whenever there was a strong wind. As Śrī Kṛṣṇa pulled the mortar along, he eventually crawled between the middle of the 2 trees. At this point, Snigdhakanta, who had been loudly narrating all this with great excitement, suddenly realized, if I tell them that Sri Hari is the cause of the 2 trees falling, I will be glorifying his Aishwarya, or opulence. That would not be at all appropriate in this assembly of Vrajvasis who are absorbed in Sri Hari's madhurya, or sweetness. I will conceal this fact and just tell them another reason why the trees fell. So he continued. Just as Śrī Kṛṣṇa came between the trees, he became filled with eagerness to proceed further and quickly crawled between them. The passage between the trees was narrow, and he crawled away. As he crawled away, the mortar became stuck. Śrī Kṛṣṇa jerked and tugged at that mortar with the conscious intention of breaking the rope that bound him to it. But instead, the two trees made a crackling sound as they were uprooted and came crashing to the ground, falling in opposite directions. The sound was so tumultuous that it made the Brajvasis feel more disorientated than deaf people, and it made their minds restless. Although Śrī Kṛṣṇa had uprooted the twin Arjuna trees, which were more powerful than thunderbolts, amazingly, he was still unable to break the rope that embodied his mother's intense attachment and relentless born of Vatsalya Prem. That's beautiful. Let me reread that. Although Śrī Kṛṣṇa had uprooted the twin Arjuna trees, which were more powerful than thunderbolts, amazingly, he was still unable to break the rope that embodied his mother's intense attachment and relentless determination born of Vatsalya Prem. In this regard, poets praise Śrī Kṛṣṇa as follows. Shamanga dukinkini dhanidharam ringatiranga pradam karshachashvar dukhalam karakarat kara prakara pratam vispurja pratimarjuna dayakatat kararjitat kautukat paryavrita nirikshanam brajavadu lalasya balyam stu. I adore the childish mood, the Balya Bhav of Śrī Kṛṣṇa, who is nurtured by the ladies of Braj. He is gloriously situated in his childhood mood, in which his dark blue limbs are adorned by his tinkling ankle bells. He bestows the greatest bliss as he crawls on his knees and repeatedly pulls at the grinding mortar, which clatters as he drags it along. Excited by the thunderous crackling of the two falling Arjuna trees, he looks all around with his restless eyes. Terrified by that thunderous sound, all the inhabitants of Gokul fainted and remained unconscious for one danda for 24 minutes. Only the children who had gathered around Śrī Kṛṣṇa did not faint. Being immersed in the utmost sweetness of his pastimes, they, like the figures in a painting, remain unaffected by fear. From a distance, Śrī Vrajaraj and the other cowherd men heard that tumultuous and terrifying sound. Fearing some calamity, they all rushed to the spot, speculating to each other along the way about what had happened. When they reached the spot, they became overcome with fear and doubt. "Oh, what could have uprooted these two trees?" they all cried. "There is no wind or rain, nor has any elephant attacked. Who has uprooted them?" Some remarked, "This is such a disaster, yet no one is here but us." "Well," reasoned another, "that is possibly because of the tumultuous sound that knocked everyone in Braj unconscious." Just then, they noticed their little Gopal near the trees, a playful smile beautifying his face as he tugged the grinding mortar, showering the bliss of his pastimes upon all. "What happened? What?" they asked as they surrounded him, discussing the cause of the disaster. Seeing his father approaching from behind, little Mukunda began to cry. Only when he noticed his father coming, then he began to cry. Although Śrī Nanda Maharaj was still bewildered, he beamed a smile to pacify his darling child and quickly untied him. Śrī Nanda Maharaj kissed the face of his son Śrī Kṛṣṇa, spoke to Nanda Baba while crying. And although he knew why Kṛṣṇa had been bound, he repeatedly asked, "Oh my son, where is the wicked person who forcibly bound you to this grinding mortar?" Kṛṣṇa, who was devoted to his father, climbed into his lap. With his arms around his father's neck and his voice quivering, he slowly spoke into his ear, "Father, it was mother who bound me." When Śrī Yashoda had heard the deafening crash, she fainted. After regaining consciousness, she pitifully began to repent. Śrī Nanda Maharaj came to know this, and therefore he did not want to immediately question her, even in private. He did not even bother to ask the little children present, What could these little infants possibly know about it, he wondered. But then the children spoke up. Father, we saw everything ourselves. We clearly saw your son go between the trees. He saw that open space over there and wanted to play there. As he moved away from the trees, the grinding mortar became caught in between them. From an angle, he tugged at the grinding mortar. Immediately, the trees made a loud crackling sound and came crashing to the ground. Two divine personalities adorned with armor, crowns, and earrings emerged from the trees, their stout figures as bright as fire. After circumambulating your Krishna and offering him obeisances, they said something to please him and then set off to the north. Śrī Nanda Maharaj and others who were completely absorbed in parental affection for Śrī Kṛṣṇa discarded the boy's words as silly prattling. Others, however, were left doubtful. All the people of Vraj came there in ones and twos, and gradually a large crowd gathered. Decorating his chest with the sun, Śrī Vrajaraj went with all of them to the Yamuna to his morning activities. He bathed in the river with his sons on his lap, and after dressing, he arranged for the Brahmins to chant Swasti Vachan, specific mantras to invoke auspiciousness, in that very place. Afterwards, he donated great wealth to them. He then returned to his home, ready to take his breakfast. Śrī Yashoda, the wife of Śrī Nanda Maharaj, felt so sad and embarrassed that she had bound Krishna that she refused to leave the inner chambers of the house. She could not even speak with the gopis who had come to see her. So, after they had all left, the respected Śrī Rohini, who was expert in reconciling all situations, directed the head kitchen maids, who were all held in high esteem, in serving the morning meal. Beckoning Śrī Vasudev's son Śrī Balaram and his own son Kanaya to join him, Śrī Vrajaraj ate with them in the midst of the endearing and indescribably sweet tumult they had made. He then rested for nearly an hour with the two brothers, who were the personifications of supreme bliss. Soon it was evening, the charming time when the cows returned from the fields. Having rested well, he felt happy and content. After coming to the Goshala, he directed the cowherds in milking the cows and caring for them. Sorry, guys. Okay. Since Śrī Kṛṣṇa and Balaram were quite young, they still needed their mother's breast milk, and cow's milk is the best representative of breast milk. Śrī Vrajaraj first asked for some excellent white rock candy to be brought from the house. After distributing it to them and the other little boys like Subal, Nanda Baba began squirting nourishing cow's milk from the cow's udders directly into the brothers' mouths. Then, as they sat in the cowshed, he taught them how to make leaf cups and how to write letters on leaves. After some time, he returned home, and in a blissful gathering, he took his evening meal with the two boys. The wise elder gopis, who adorns their respective dynasties like jewels or goddesses of wealth, always desired Śrī Vrajaraj's happiness. Therefore, after he had finished his meal, they approached him along with Śrī Rohini and said, "O king, Krishna's mother has not eaten anything all day, nor has she spoken with anyone. Seeing her condition, all the maids and other gopis have also been sitting silently, and they also have not eaten anything." Śrī Vrajaraj was both sorry and amused. "What can I do?" he asked. She herself can see the detrimental effect of submitting to her anger. At this, tears began streaming down the gopis' faces, and they sobbed. "Oh no, she is so soft, internally and externally. Hearing these painful words of yours, she will become even more aggrieved." Smiling, Śrī Vrajaraj asked his son, "My dear boy, do you want to go to your mother?" Śrī Kṛṣṇa promptly responded, "No, no. I will stay with you only." Giggling, the wife of Śrī Vrajaraj's elder brother, Śrī Upananda, questioned him, If you are only ever with father, whose breast milk will you drink?" I will drink warm squirts of cow's milk mixed with rock candy, Krishna replied. With whom will you play? All the gopis asked. I will play with father and my brother too, he answered. Śrī Vrajaraj then asked, why don't you go to your brother's mother, Rohini? Tears welled up in Krishna's eyes, and he angrily said, she was not there for me when I needed her. At this, tearful-eyed Sri Rohini spoke gently. My dear son, why are you so harsh? Your mother is in so much anguish. Krishna pretended not to hear her words, and with moist eyes, simply gazed at the face of his father. Upon the motioning of Sri Rohini, Balaram ran forward and seized Krishna's hand to bring him to her. But he wrestled out of Balaram's grip, ran back to his father's lap and tightly hugged him. While on the lap of Vrajaraj, he stood up and draped his arms around his father's neck. Krishna gazed into his eyes, which were now releasing a stream of tears, and absolutely captivated his father. Śrī Vrajaraj knew that really Krishna dearly loved his mother from the core of his heart. To unearth that inner love, he raised his hand and said, if you tell me to, I will beat your mother. Shri Krishna could not tolerate this and tightly grabbed his father's arm with both hands. This made Nanda Baba laugh. Because he had the inherent Vatsalya bhav of being a father, he compassionately thought to the condition of Mother Yashoda's heart and said, son, what will you do if your mother just... In this statement, Sri Nanda Maharaj jokingly implied the word that means the opposite of lives. Shri Krishna had the nature of a child, and therefore he became overwhelmed for want of his mother. With tear-filled eyes, he said, where is my mother? I am going to her. In this anxiety, he stumbled into Rohini's arms, and a din arose as everyone began to laugh. What's a din? Anyways, and a din arose as everyone began to laugh. Meanwhile, Shri Rohini, who bestows supreme joy upon all, entered into the house with teary-eyed Krishna, who joyously embraced his mother. Shri Yashoda let forth deep sighs that resembled the lowing of a cow. She rested her chin on her darling child's head and began to weep. Her crying, which was full of love, completely melted her heart. Upon seeing her condition, everyone there also began to weep. The elderly gopis consoled Shri Yashoda in various ways. Gradually, her heart began to feel relief, and the charm of her face began to reappear. Then Shri Yashoda, the daughter of Shri Samukha Gopa, fed her darling son her breast milk to his great delight. After this, she took her meal with the wife of Shri Upananda and the other ladies, who were her guests. After this, she took her meal with the wife of Shri Upananda and the other ladies, who were her greatest well-wishers. As she ate, she kept Shri Krishna and his elder brother Shri Balaram right beside her. Shri Yashoda felt so utterly ashamed that for 3 days she did not come before the eyes of Śrī Vrajaraj. Finally, Shri Bal-Gopal, who always carries out his father's orders, personally brought her before him, pulling her by her upper cloth. Also, from that day onward, the ladies of Vraj jokingly and blissfully began calling Shri Krishna Damodar, and remarking, this is our same enchanting blue boy, Shri Shyam Manohar. 1 second, I just need to cough. Okay. Although Shri Yashoda repeatedly witnesses Shri Krishna's superhuman majesty, this majesty never even slightly affects her vatsalya, or motherly affection for him. Which scholar on earth is really able to praise her? Shri Shukadev Gosvāmī has even stated that what to speak of others, Shri Brahma, Shri Shankar, and Shri Lakshmi have failed to achieve even 100th of the satisfaction and happiness of what Shri Bala Mukunda, he who bestows liberation, has awarded Shri Yashoda. In other words, from the perspective of bhakti, Shri Brahma, Shri Shankar, and Shri Lakshmi have failed to achieve even a small fraction of Shri Yashoda's bhakti. Srila Shukadev Gosvāmī has thoroughly disclosed the splendorous fame of Shri Yashoda, which reverberates like a drum throughout the 3 worlds. The Śrīmad Bhagavatam 10.9.20 and other scriptures verify this. At this point, Śrī Balaram turns to his younger brother Śrī Kṛṣṇa and excitedly remarked, "Do you remember when we used to live in Mahavan Gokul?" Śrī Kṛṣṇa smiled. Yes, we had such fun sporting there." Snigdhakanta then concluded the day's narration. "O king of the cowherders, your divine son is so amazing. He was even able to make twin Arjuna trees his dedicated devotees." The author Śrīla Jīva Gosvāmī comments, As all the members of the assembly returned to their respective homes after hearing the Śrī Damodar Lila, they felt as if they had directly witnessed that festive pastime. One second, let me drink some water. Okay. The next day, while seated amidst that effulgent assembly, Shri Vrajaraj asked, "My dear son Snigdhakanta, those 2 trees in Vraj that you mentioned used to grant all of one's cherished desires. In that way, they were like demigods. Who were these trees in their previous births, and why did they come to Vraj? Moreover, when they gave up their lives as trees, what forms did they take, and where did they go?" Snigdhakanta replied, "Those 2 trees were the sons of Shri Shiva's friend Shri Kuvera, the king of the Yakshas. Once they behaved horrendously in front of the best of rishis, Devarshi Shri Narad. Consequently, he punished them to live as trees. This punishment was Shri Narad's extreme favor upon them, because they achieved bhakti for Shri Bhagavan. Whenever you descend to this world, they also come as twin Arjuna trees in front of your home in Mahavan. These trees later attained their ultimate destination and became the best of Shri Bhagavan's devotees. However, at present, they are illustriously situated in the abode of Premi Bhaktas, where they reveal to others the results of performing bhakti to Shri Bhagavan." His curiosity aroused, Shri Vrajaraj again inquired, "Tell me frankly, son, where are they at present?" At this moment, Snigdhakanta bowed his head and became silent. Then he started glancing at Madhukanta from the corners of his eyes. Shri Vrajaraj pressed Snigdhakanta even further. "Why are you embarrassed to speak?" With great respect, Snigdhakanta replied, "O king, what more can we say? Your distinguished self can understand everything." Shri Vrajaraj beamed. "It is true, your words merely repeat what your silence is trying to say. By our virtuous disposition, certainly we have all understood your meaning. But still, we want you to satisfy us by telling it to us yourselves." Snigdhakanta said, The twin trees are the sons of Kuvera, Nalukuvara, and Manigriva, received the supreme destination of residing in Vraj in exchange for their insolence at the lotus feet of Shri Devarshi Narad, which are a shower of all types of bliss. His feet, which are a shower of all types of bliss. Those 2 are none other than we. Those 2 are none other than we, the 2 present before you. Hearing this with mixed feelings of curiosity and pleasure, Shri Vrajaraj and all others present began gazing at their faces and happily embraced them as if meeting them for the first time. After hearing his brother's reply to Shri Vrajaraj's inquiry, Madhukanta took the opportunity to begin that day's narration. Wow! Shri Gopāla-campūḥ ki jai! Śrīla Jīva Gosvāmīpāda ki jai! Shri Dāmodarāṣṭakam ki jai! Shri Nandanandan, Shri Krishna Chandra ki jai! Shri Radha Damodar ki jai! Shri Daubhaya ki jai! Shri Rohini Devi ki jai! Shri Sarva Vrajavasi Gan ki jai! Śrī Dāma-bandhana-nibandhanam ki jai! Shri Madhukanta Snigdhakanta ki jai!
Srila Gurudev ki jai, Srila Param Gurudev ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Vrindai Tulsidevai Priyai Keśava Krishna Bhakti Padadevi Sattvatai Namo Namaha. Vancha kalpatarubhyashta kripa sindhubhya vacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Dandavat pranams. That was beyond words. That was amazing. All right, thank you for reading with me. Now we officially finished the wonderful book Śrī Dāmodarāṣṭakam, and yeah, I will begin our reading from Śrīmad Bhagavatam the day after tomorrow, and what the program will start at 6:15 in the morning, doing some kirtan, 45 minutes of kirtan, and then afterwards we will continue from Śrīmad Bhagavatam from story of Prahlāda. We just got up to the moment right when it started talking about Prahlāda, and then we had to break. And so we'll continue that again, day after tomorrow. All right, Jai Shri Radhe. Hari Bol.